Well, this is an awesome event. Thank you for coming out. I'm here with my good colleague that I'll introduce to you shortly. Don Blake, he's from Richmond, from Virginia Christian Alliance. And he's an awesome guy. I always refer to him as my senior partner. But I do that with respect because he's got more wisdom than I have. He's got more sense than I have. And whenever I have a problem, I go to him and he sorts the problem out. So Don, I do that with respect. Anyway, I wanted to give you guys that haven't heard the story of First Landing. Now you see this beautiful picture here? Yeah. Have you seen this before? So I've got a question to ask. Where and when did the first settlers arrive in America where a covenant was made? I mean, I know there's some people who were here before, you've heard the story, but those that haven't been here, where was that? Not sure? Well, 90% of America do not know when you ask them that question, and 10% will say Jamestown or Plymouth. Now, Jamestown is fairly close, but what happened was on the 26th of April, 1607, 3 ships came in from England, and they came in under proclamation from King James, and he sent the 3 ships to the new land, and it took 144 days to arrive at the new land. And when those ships arrived, there was a pastor on board. Here he is. Reverend Robert Hunt is his name. And he went on the 29th, there were 3 days in prayer and fasting, and on the 29th of April, he went ashore and he proclaimed a covenant. And so what happened was that those 3 ships went up the James River, and in 2 weeks' time after that, they arrived at what became the Jamestown settlement. So the answer to this question is, where did that start? It was actually in Virginia Beach, at Cape Henry. That's what it was called at that time. Now, a little story going back to July last year. There was an event at Virginia Beach. There were about 4,000 people attending. I was asked to pray over a group at First Landing. There's a cross there. It's on a military base. And I knew nothing about First Landing. In fact, most of us that went there knew nothing about First Landing. So during this prayer, I felt the presence of the Lord in a mighty way, but it was a sadness. I could not relate to what was happening. I went back home, and a week later, during that week, I was praying and trying to understand what is going on. And I woke up one morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard this. I had a download. I didn't hear it audibly, but I had a download in my spirit. And this is what it said. Go back to origin, go back to origin. I had no idea what that meant. And over a few days, I met up and spoke with a Navy SEAL who knew the history of First Landing. And he explained to me what had actually happened. I then went to Jamestown with my brother. We then did some research on Plymouth. And the answer to that question, going back to origin, we had to go back to where the gospel first came into America, where a covenant was made. Now, later on today, we're going to actually read that covenant, and you'll see how powerful that covenant is. So I wanted to hand over to my friend Don Blake. He's collected a lot of information regarding First Landing, and I wanted him just to introduce himself and share some of his ideas. He's on our national team of First Landing. Incidentally, you can find this website on firstlanding1607.com. We had about 300 people attend this event, and amongst those, can you remember the key people that came there, Don? At our event in Virginia Beach, we had Michelle Bachman, we had David Barton, Bill Federer, and of course we had Glenn Beck as well. A few weeks ago, Glenn Beck released the video of his speech, and together between his videos and people watching the event, we've had over 1 million people that know now about First Landing. So we're planning to go back there in the beginning of the year, next April, and we'll have a similar event. And so, Don, do you want to just share your side?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. You know, this is a big deal, and we'll try to tell you why it's such a big deal, why it's so important to America from 2007. I mean, 1607 until right now. And 2007 was the 400th anniversary. Probably none of you knew about this, but they talked about Jamestown in 2007. Big deal in Jamestown. Nothing at Jamestown refers to First Landing. I want to share with you a book that I bought online. It's a 100-year-old book. Now, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, went all the way through school there and college there. Never did I hear or read in any textbook anywhere that there's such a place called First Landing, or that there had been a covenant there. All about Jamestown. Captain John Smith, Pocahontas, that's all, we grew up on that. Probably the rest of you too. I mean, all across America. John Smith. John Smith was not a hero. And if you get into the history, he was in chains, locked on the boat when they went across, went ashore and planted his cross there, because they were so mad at him that they were going to charge him with mutiny. However, things changed when they opened their orders up. I want to read to you from a book written in 1928, and I happen to have an original copy signed by the author, and my copy is number 175. So that means only 174 people before me got a copy of this book. Now, think about it, this is 100 years ago almost. A historian wrote the history of Virginia from 1607 to 1928, because that's all they were, 1928. So he didn't have influence of all these professors and everything we have today telling us what's right and what's wrong and whatever. And he wrote, "Not a man in all the world was aware that at Cape Henry, April the 26th, 1607, one of the greatest events in modern times had taken place. It is the most significant date in American history, except perhaps for 1492 and 1776. It marked the birth of Virginia as a political entity, and by the same token, the birth of American institutions. It was the germ of which America was logically and consistently grown. The date also marks the beginning of British colonization, the beginning of the worldwide spread of the British thought, culture, trade, ideas, religion, justice, and finance." And he goes on to say that those men, this is a picture that was done, I have a copy of one of the original prints that CBN did, and they actually did a movie about this too, about Robert Hunt. But this man goes on to say that all of Western culture, all of Western law, common law, came to America that day when they arrived, the first permanent English settlement people arrived right there and planted across. And the king actually signed the charter, the 1606 charter, Virginia Company Charter. He signed the charter obviously without reading it, because it said in the charter that all rights come from God. Now, you know how kings are, especially in the 1600s. They think they have all the rights. So one of the early historians said, obviously, he didn't bother to read what he signed. You know, we sign lots of things. You know, medical forms, you sign them. Okay, you got to sign. You want the shot, sign the form. That was so amazing. And then we came from there to the first General Assembly, which was in Virginia. And so the early government started in Virginia. The first four to five presidents were from Virginia. I mean, we got like 9 presidents from Virginia, something like that. There's a bunch of them. You know, so Virginia was the mother of states and the mother of statesmen, of presidents. So you think about that. It started when a Anglican priest came from England, and he was hand-chosen. Now, of all the priests in England, we call it Episcopal Church here, but the Anglican Church is still in existence. But all the Anglican Church priests there, they chose one man, looked for one man to come and to do this. And he had written orders. I mean, they wrote, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go there and have a service. We even know the date, what was in the book that they read. You know, we can go back to the Anglican services of 1607 and read what he would have done on that particular day. And so they know what he said. Plus, what did they do in the old days? They wrote everything down. They wrote orders and say, this is what you're supposed to do. Then you are supposed to report back to the king or to whoever is running the Virginia company. And you say, this is what we did. And I have a book that is the complete records of the Virginia company, where they wrote everything down, all the prayers down, everything. I mean, it's a big, thick book. It's all been translated into modern English. So we know what these people did. And this came from this print up here in 1987, I think, is when the print was made by CBN. And so they have a movie that looks just like this. Now the man who designed this took his cell phone and took a picture of my picture here and took a picture of it and blew that up. We had the greatest volunteers, all volunteers. None of us get paid for anything. We put this program on, and Jack was saying that over 1 million people have been on the website or looked at these videos of the whole program. We had 50,000 people watching this program live streamed. We knew the computers, they show this stuff going up and down on the computers, say, while we were there. And so we think that over 200,000 people saw it over time on the website, but on Glenn Beck's Blaze TV, his speech, which is 48 minutes long, and you can watch the whole thing. He put it on his Blaze TV. And as over a week ago, 400 and some thousand people had seen his speech. This is amazing. People are so hungry for the truth, and they're so hungry to know, but they don't know what happened. On that day, April the 29th, 1607, they planted a cross and claimed the land for Christ and King and made a covenant. And Jack's going to we did a re-covenant. We did the old covenant there, and then we did a re-covenant there with 200 people in the room, and all of us on stage, and people watching it online, and we re-covenanted this country back. Now, God did not forget his side. I mean, covenants are two-party things, right? God didn't forget his. We forgot ours. Not only did we forget ours, and if you go to get the New American Magazine, you'll read, and you actually see on the website, I was interviewed, but I said our own government has kept this from us, because why wouldn't they tell us about that instead of telling us about Pocahontas? It's a myth anyway. Can you believe that Pocahontas laid her head on her neck on Captain John Smith to keep his head from being cut off? I mean, nobody believes this stuff. But this sounds good for a movie or whatever, you know? But people actually wrote down stuff. John Smith was not the greatest guy in the world, but he went back to England, he wrote his own story, and that's what you hear. But our government kept this from us, because why? It's Christian. And they have kept Christianity from us for decades and decades and decades. This was the 416th year anniversary of it. And if you go back and think about each of you, what happened 416 years ago? I'm just going to show you and tell you here just in a second. 416 years ago, what were your ancestors? In order to be born as a person, you had to have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third-grade grandparents, 64 great-great-grandparents, 128 fifth-generation grandparents, 256 sixth great-grandparents, 512 seventh, eighth. It goes down to, over the last 400 years, we have had over 4,000 people who were living before we became living. Think about that now. That's in 400 years. And so first landing was 416 years ago. Over 4,000 people existed before we came into existence. Isn't that amazing? I mean, who figures this all stuff out? But somebody did. They put it online. But anyway, there's history out there that we don't know because our government didn't want us to know. These college-educated people, these elites, don't want us to know. And it started, obviously, before my time, because they never taught me that in school, and I might be the oldest person in here, I don't know. Anyway, you look kind of old. But anyway, But they didn't teach us this. They hid this from us. They didn't want us to know. You go down to Virginia Beach, there's no billboards down there that say, go see First Landing where they did a covenant. You go where the cross is. There was an original wooden cross there, and now it's a granite cross that they established in 1935. There's nothing at the cross that says why the cross is put there or who put it there. At the cross, to get to see the cross, you have to go through the fort. So I've been turned down. I've got a military ID, and I've been turned down twice to go through there myself. And I saw a 3-star admiral almost get turned down in front of me. He was a retired admiral, but he was a 3-star admiral. I mean, and he had, he was having some difficulty. That was the day we went there as a group, and so they have made it difficult for us to get there to the beach where they're planting the cross and where there's a granite cross there now. Not only that, the only sign there, there's a picture there that sort of looks like this, but it doesn't tell you who, what it was all about, what the cross was about, or anything else. But you have to look for that picture. Now you don't have to look for the pictures of the dolphins and the crabs and the starfish. They've got pictures of those things explaining this is a dolphin, this is a starfish, whatever. Like who cares? Because what's this cross thing here about? It's just amazing. They hid from there. Then they created a state park, and it's called First Landing State Park. Well, let's go see what they have at First Landing State Park. Do they have a cross? No. Do they have anything about the cross? No. Do they have a sign that these highway signs that it says First Landing? Well, you cannot read that at 45 miles an hour going down Shore Drive. So you can't pull over because there's no place to park. So they don't want us to know. Now the people think they're doing the right thing. Those people, Dr. Fury is standing here talking, you listen to other people. People think they're doing the right thing, but they've been indoctrinated. So the young man who was here, Ryan, said, we've got to be discerning about truth. We have to know what's true. And so the only way Noah was talking about truth, I think. Anyway, so we have to discern. Say, Lord, give me the knowledge and this discernibility to discern what's true. And so we talked to Pastor last week. A conversation we had going on, and I said, look, there's one of your guys in your church. He just doesn't believe in a lot of stuff, but he reads the Bible every day and all this other, and it's a demonic spirit that is spread across this land. It has, and so you have to armor yourself. You've got to put on the armor and say, Lord, protect me from this demonic spirit. Some people say the spirit of Jezebel. Well, we had Jezebel. We still have Jezebel. Her name is Hillary Clinton. But, these people are evil people. And they don't even know that they're evil. And people who have friends or we sit in church with or whatever, they don't know that they're being deceived because the Spirit has not touched them, and we only need a remnant. Right now, there's a remnant tour going on across the country, and two of our teammates and some other people are traveling, and they're reaching out to people. We plan to raise enough money to put RVs out there and to do big events in colleges for the young people. We need young people. You look at Jack. Jack's no spring chicken. I'm no spring chicken. Craig Hudgens, who helped us on this in Virginia, we're all senior citizens. We're all volunteers. So we need people like you, young lady, to say, look, there's a message out here. And you people have got to listen to it. You young people, you've got to pick up the mantle and carry this through. But to do that, you have to know your history. And if you go to this website, you're looking here at 1607 Project. That's what we named it ourselves when we started. And so this covenant has got to go out. We have got to wake the people up that this land was claimed. Barack Obama said, we're not a Christian nation. Okay, you're not a Christian person, number one, but we are, and we can prove it. It's been written down, and history's got it written down. You can go on Amazon, you can buy the video, First Landing video that CBN did. It cost them $1.2 million in 2007, which they had for their 400th anniversary. It's a movie that was made for movie theaters. I mean, that will tell you the whole story about Robert Hunt and how he came to do this, and then at the end of the movie, you say, "Oh, gee, I wish that hadn't happened to Robert Hunt." But anyway, man sacrificed his family and 2 kids and a wife, and came to America and never returned. because a lot of people died in Jamestown. I know like half of the people died. I mean, it was kind of bad, but they came and got replenished. But from those shores went the first General Assembly in a Western culture. I mean, democracy, you know? We started democracy here. Then we led all the way up to 1776 and a Declaration of Independence. And what does it say in the Declaration of Independence? In the year of our Lord. It says, rights from our Creator. It's in there, and you cannot deny it. From the very beginning, April the 29th, 1607, they planted a cross and claimed this land. Not only that, it goes back to 1578. Sir Francis Drake. Anybody remember Francis Drake? I barely remember that. You got to read this thing. In 1507, this guy named Sir Francis Drake, he traveled all around. Okay, I got that, teacher. Okay, I'll pass it on the test. Francis Drake was British, and he circumnavigated the world. It took him like 3 years to do it. But he came over to the Pacific, and he landed outside of what's now San Francisco. And he did what? He planted a cross, and he claimed the land for Christ and for England. It's written down. It's written down. I mean, you can't deny things that are written down in history 400 years ago, 500 years ago. And so when he did that, in 1578, and then this cross was planted in 1607, from shore to shore, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And when you look at the map, I'll be glad to show it. I didn't bring the big one with me today, but I got a big map that shows 1606 map that was done that shows the what the United States was and what Virginia was back then. And it's the whole country except for Florida, from Florida all the way across Mexico and that kind of, and then up in the Great Lakes area, up in New York, Vermont, was part of Canada. And so you had the French had up there, and then the Spanish had below in the Florida area, all west. So think about this. Almost every state in the Union was in land known as Virginia, and they had in 1606 a map showing what the coordinates were. So they didn't know it was 3,000 miles across, but they knew it started here and it stopped here. And so these things were amazing history, how big this country was, and it was all called Virginia. Most all of it was called Virginia back then. So I don't know what else I can tell you up here, but I would say, we did have a covenant, which I think it's on one of Jack's one of the handouts here, but the governor gave us a certificate, and this is actually the copy. I mean, this is the real certificate the governor of Virginia signed for us, recognizing First Landing Day. And then we got from Congress, we got a congressional reading, so we got a copy of that here. So we did get recognition from our government. And then I have some other things you can look it up here. And one thing that let me ask you if you know this, and I'll finish up, Jack, in a second. Has anybody ever heard of Christian Heritage Day, week, month? Have you ever heard of a Christian in Virginia? Yeah. You have heard of it? Homeschoolers have. All right, who declared, and when was it declared, do you know? No. Okay, well, last year, Governor Youngkin declared Christian Heritage Week from the last few days in February to the first few days in March. I have never found anybody, even elected officials, that knew. We found it on the internet. I don't know why he did this, but he didn't do it again this year. But if you go on the internet, you can find that the General Assembly declared last year a resolution that Hindu Heritage Month will be for the month of October and will be in perpetuity. So the Hindus have Hindu Heritage Month. We can't even get Christian Heritage Day or week or month. And so our government and our leaders don't know this. So you need to know this. You need to know that they are avoiding this stuff. Why are they avoiding this, and why do they do the Hindu stuff? But I mean, in perpetuity, I got a copy of it. It says in perpetuity. That means how long? That's forever. So the month of October in Virginia, it's going to be Hindu Heritage Month, but we don't even have one day, 1 week, or 1 month as Christian Heritage Month. So think about this. When you're talking to these people who, getting elected in November, why don't you guys do something for the Christians? Why don't you make it mandatory that they teach about this in their public schools? The Senate and the House in 2017 did do a resolution that it was mandatory to teach the history of the Virginia Charter. I'll bet nobody has ever been to school and learned about the Virginia Charter. But anyway, just give this some thought. You can look up here and read in this stuff if you want to. Go on the website. Everything you want to see is on this website. And we're putting more stuff on. This whole binder here is got to go on our website. So, this is all the stuff we're collecting to put on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Before we end, I want to give you some feedback. You guys don't know it, but you were our guinea pigs for America. On the 8th of July, do you remember we asked some questions? We gave you 20 spheres of influence, and we asked you to indicate 2 or 3 of the interest levels. Now, what you have in front of you, you should have this. This is a graph that shows basically your level of interest. Now, we suddenly realized this could be used in universities. In fact, yesterday I spoke to someone at Liberty University. They're going to use this as a test. It can be used in any organization, any church, because most pastors do not have an understanding of the level of interest in their congregation. And that can go for universities, it can go for anything. So this could be an incredible tool, and we're going to have this available in October. You're going to be able to do this online as individuals and identify where you fit. For example, if you look at item 3, education, you can see how important that is, the public, private, and homeschooling. Number 6, family, that was pro-life, child trafficking, gender identity crisis, drugs, and any family values. So you can see this is what you guys are thinking for this region. Now, you can do this for any church, any organization, anywhere else in the country. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention in closing, at the back of that document, the well-known national leader Dutch Sheets, in a recent conference during early August 2023, was quoted as saying that only 14% of pastors are fully engaged and relevant in society, according to a recent Barna Research poll. The Barna Research Group asked people what they would like to hear from the pulpit. Here are their responses. 86% of the pastors do not generally address these issues. 91% responded they would like to hear about abortion. 86% religious liberty and persecution. 85% poverty. 83% cultural and moral restoration. 82% on sexual identity, 77% on Christian heritage, 73% on church and government. They also wanted to know about Islam. 72% were asking, what is that all about? So those are some things to think about, and ask the question, are your churches relevant? Are your communities relevant? And encourage people to actually do this test. You can do this in any organization. You just have to list it and then graph where people fit in. Anyway, thank you for that. Hopefully this will be informative for you. Thank you very much.